One person asked me, he said, look, I'm already receiving enlightenment, I don't need to do Kriya. Another person says, after doing 1 hour of Kriya, I get to enlightened state. Another says, after doing 6 months of Kriya, I get to this state. One said, after 6 lives, I get. So I said, the fellow who is at the lowest, who gets the enlightenment doing no Kriya, and the high, they said, why do you say that? I said, because the state at which you are, you can get an enlightenment in an ignorant state also. Every chakra, at which level are you enlightened? That means your mind is open to the knowingness of that particular dimension you are in. But since you cannot see your own face, you cannot tell whether you are in an earthly simple dimension of enlightenment or you are in the Buddha dimension of enlightenment. So everybody mistakes the psychic experience or a plain spiritual experience which they call enlightenment. Everything is enlightenment. You know. So which dimension you are enlightened in, there you need the Guru to tell you that you are enlightened in this. It's an enlightenment. There's no doubt about it. But which level you are enlightened at, this is the question to be discussed and known. And if people are confident and ignorant, living in the enlightenment of the naval center, thinking that they are at the transpersonal point, I'm sorry. There are strict guidelines and rules laid down in the Kalki Puran, the Bhavishya Puran, the Bhagavad Gita, the Siddha Siddhanta Sangraha. They tell you these states of higher and higher. So don't ever think, we don't want a fellow to go far and think he's enlightened and land up in a big blotch at the end of the journey and then say, oh Guru, why didn't you warn me? You should have told me. I would have humbled myself, I would have gone down and come. It was just a state of euphoric bliss, a psychic state, an ecstasy of a rosy rest. But when you enlighten from the first to the second grade, it is an enlightenment. When you grow from second to third grade, it's an enlightenment. But that enlightenment should not be confused with the Nath field of the Buddha field, of the enlightenment of the isness of the zero, not zero. Right? That is a totally different enlightenment. They say any old person, any yogi who gets enlightened or goes into Nirvikalpa Samadhi, is it the same as Gautam Buddha's Samadhi? No, definitely not. Because is your enlightenment an individual enlightenment? Is it a family enlightenment? Is it a community enlightenment? Is it a humanity enlightenment? Is it a world enlightenment? Is it a solar enlightenment to that degree of the solar system? Is it a galactic enlightenment? Cluster, supercluster. Is it a cosmic enlightenment? Or is it the enlightenment beyond, for which there are no human words? So this is what you must safeguard against. If you choose not to, you can live in a fool's paradise all your life. Be the loser for it. These are just guidelines which you have to think of. It's not to discourage anyone. Disciple can't see his own face in the mirror. Only a witness can tell the speed of a moving obstacle. The driver in the car cannot tell. He cannot experience the movement because he himself is in the car. He may get an indicator through the speedometer, but he cannot feel the speed at which he is going at. Or he cannot judge how fast he is going in relation to a standing object. Only the witness standing, the stander by can see vroom, 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 and no speed. There's a correlation. Point of reference is the earth, a still object. The witness and the man of action. So he can tell and experience the speed, can visualize the speed. So the Guru is the eternal witness who visualizes the speed of your evolution and can tell where you are at. The human being is like a little child. How high have I climbed, Gurunath? Hey, look at me, I've climbed higher. Look at me, I've climbed higher. So people would definitely like to know how high they've climbed. To yoga of the East is very subjective. And West, the Western mind is trained to approach things objectively, from the outside. It wants an ephemerical test. It wants a test, of scientific progress, of yogic progress, that which can be measured. The Eastern approach is subjective. It can validate it by personal experience. But not only is the validation of personal experience required, a guide and a senior professor, if I may use the word, is required for the sabbatical he takes for his yogic practice, to tell him the benchmarks of where he stands, because the master is like the witness. The student, the disciple, is the one involved in the spiritual activity himself. He himself is the state. So to stand apart and see it is more difficult than the person who is already the witness. So because it's a subjective state, it becomes more difficult to put it in an objective language. We can try it as far as we like. People have described it in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. To take a psychic experience as an enlightenment is not enlightenment. Because if you see a light or have an euphoric bliss, or you feel very blissful, you feel you're enlightened, it's certainly not an enlightenment. And people should be cautioned against this false placebo, because you're trapped in psychic experiences of bliss, of euphoria, a temporary so-called psychic orgasm, which you think to be the bliss of samadhi. So these things should be directed. They're bits and pieces of the whole. That I do agree. They're pathways to the main eternal bliss, which is indescribable. Because it is indescribable, you cannot frame it. You cannot frame it. You cannot put it into words. But yes, the moment you try to rationalize it, the experience breaks. Because the rationale or rationalize means to break down, to set apart piece by piece. A rose looks beautiful only when it is a rose. When I try to rationalize it petal by petal and put it apart, it looks very ugly. So also something should be left for higher qualities than the arrogant human mind, which thinks that it knows everything, which thinks that everything should be rationalized, and which thinks that everything should be done like the man wants to do it. They want to see, now would you like to see God the way you want to see God, through rationality? Or would you like to see God as He is? What would you like to see God as?
As He is.
You would like to see God as He is. What would happen if you saw God scientifically through the manner that you have set forward? You, the human being, comparing with the cosmic God. Who are you? Where are you? What are you? Nothing. Either get lost in your ego or get lost in God. So, it's very important not to standardize that it is only called a science if it is in the test tube, if it can be measured in a laboratory. No, that's not the only way of knowing. No, there is another way of knowing. I respect the human being. I respect the energy of the human being, and therefore it's important to know the true self subjectively rather than objectively. So even subjective knowing, if repeatedly confirmed by thousands of people, becomes a scientifically valid fact. And who set the rules that it should be an objective laboratory test? Well, we can set the rule that it should be a subjective human test. There are many people, many poets, and many humble and sincere people who have experienced God in all His love and light. And they cannot bring to words, because words are very callous, they're very limited. So therefore, subjective experience of every individual, if tallied and concurred by 100 other individuals, becomes a scientific fact. This I postulate, this I say with a great affirmation, and this should be so in the future, and it will be so. That a lot of respect will be given to the personal experience of the human being, the human mind, the human soul, and the human spirit. And if tens of thousands of people tally this experience, then nothing can stop it from being a scientific fact. We need science, we need it at a particular level, but it has its limitations. Those limitations which it has can be completed by the subjective experience of man, who has his own tools of scientific measurements. He has an inner sight, he has clairvoyance, he has clairaudience, he has intuition, he has the 6 chakras, a fine laboratory within himself.
Gorakshagorkanathaya Shiva Shambho Namaya Shiva Shambho Namaya Shiva Gorakshagorkanathaya